right? So now when that happens and I actually click on something, right, I'm going to change the text in that lower left area of my grid. Right? And again, just pretend you're doing a Windows program, mything.text. Right? So that's where we're seeing the behavior that we just saw right here when I just change that value. Is that cool? And again, think about what we just did. I didn't show you any paint events. I didn't show you any animation code. I didn't show you any threading code. Right? That's all being handled through markup.
The callback to that event is that's all in the same thread. So if you have a long-running process back here in your click event, you could essentially freeze up the Silverlight interface.
Yeah, this is being handled in the same UI thread, right? But remember, we have the whole threading namespace, right? And we're going to do some async stuff here, not threading per se, but an asynchronous call. Yeah.
How's what is the CPU utilization while the thing is running?
Gosh, I never looked. I guess it depends what you're trying to do.
Some companies CPU like CPU power and all
On your client.
Yeah, this is all being done on the client,
right.
right? I mean, I guess it's hard to give you an exact answer. I mean, it's based on what your plugin's doing, right? Now, this is just a chunk downloaded into the client's machine, right? Running on the client machine. Another helpful way to think of this, too, is, ASP.NET is really a server-side technology, right? All the action is really happening on the web server, right? There's a little bit of stuff with Ajax, but by and large, it's all on the web server. Silverlight is all on the client, right? It comes from a web server originally, but now it's going to be in the client browser, living there, doing something, taking up the client's processing power, right? Again, very similar to a Java applet, right? Same idea.
Is it still using the hardware for the graphics, or is it using software?
Yeah, the one thing which is, you can't fault Microsoft for this, but one thing that we don't have in the graphics area of Silverlight is the 3D rendering part of it, because that is hard-coded to DirectX, and what does Macintosh not have? Right. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at the other piece. Right? So we've just taken a look now at how that button got so pretty and how these little circles got so interesting. But now we got the big old grid of data. Okay, now again, let me just show you how that's going to look. Okay, so now again, the reason that I did this animation is to show the async part, because that kind of gets to the question that was asked back there. So I'm going to click this button, and we're going to see a slight delay, because this Silverlight plugin is making a remote method call, well, on my machine, but it's going out of bandwidth, right? And it's going to the other WCF service. So it's not going back to the web server where it got the page. It's going to this other place where the service is, right? What do I get back from that call? Remember what we returned back? The array of those objects. And what am I going to do with them? Well, I'm going to slap them on this grid, okay? But now watch how I'm going to click the button. The balls are going to keep doing their deal, but it's going to be a little bit of a lag. Right? So you see how we just got back that data from the remote call? Right? Now, another interesting thing here too. Remember that this grid, this can be completely described through markup. So if you don't like the way the grid looks, you can change the way the grid looks. Now, I just did something very simple, but you see my little arrow? Right? So remember how each one of the members of that array, every circle had a message? Right? So the message from circle number 3 is, I've got nothing to say, don't bother me. The message from number 1 is, pick me, I just came in. But that little red arrow, that's actually the result of a data template. Pretty lame data template, but think about any kind of a grid or a list box, and you want to really stylize what's in there. Okay, so imagine you got a normal list box that has a bunch of strings. Boring. What if each item of the list box was actually a, stack panel, and each item had an image, text, and an animation, right? Well, then all of a sudden, this idea of a data template is much more intriguing. So let's take a look at how this grid is showing all this stuff here. Okay. Notice again that we're going to do a data binding operation, right? So remember how some of the circles were new and some were not? So here we see how some things are checked and some things aren't checked, right? Based on the value of that Boolean property. Now, like pretty much everything, we can either write all this kind of stuff in markup or code or both. So for this data binding operation, I kind of did a little bit of both. Right? So we're kind of at the last part of the markup now. Now, see how it says data colon there? Can anyone remember why? What was that data thing I declared way up on top again? Yeah, that was a CLR namespace, right? Because I'm trying to get something in a library that I don't get by default. Okay? And that is where the data grid is. Now, notice how this grid can also be templatized. Not sure if that's a word or not, but we'll go with it. And here, I am defining a template for every row of the grid. And what is my row? Well, it's a stack panel. Okay? What's in my stack panel? Oh, I got a little line. So there's my arrow, my red arrow, right? But I also got this. Okay, let's just maybe see it one more time so we can visualize what's happening. Okay, so see it says message from the circle colon, pick me, I just came in, right? Well, if we look at the stack panel, I got two text blocks. Okay, remember, this one here is hard-coded, message from the circle. This part here is dynamic, and that's being done through the data binding operation. So again, try to keep the moving parts going, right? I call the WCF service, I get back an array of objects. In the array of objects are circles. Each one has a message property, right? So I'm going to be mapping the property value of the object that I got from the service onto this grid, okay? And that's where I can go ahead and use this markup extension called binding. Message, that's the actual name of the property, right? So that right there, message, that's what we saw back here, way over yonder. That's this guy, message, right? Now you might say, okay, well, I can kind of get the gist of how every row is composed of a stack panel that consists of some text blocks and an image. What I don't quite understand is how that grid knows that the message property is coming from some array of objects, right? Where is that being set up? Meaning, what's the data source? How does this grid actually know there's the source, get the message property? Well, that's where I kind of broke it up into code, right? Because I'm doing a remote method call here, right? You click on that button. So let's take a peek at that then.